if to be supplied, or all the students for that matter, supplied with a list of the various branches of the United States Army during the time frame of World War II. And if that student will see me during the break tonight, or any others that want this information, I have prepared the list to the best of my recollection. I guess all of us are students. You've heard the saying that you never stop learning. Let me share with you what I learned today. A letter from Medicare. Now that shouldn't surprise you. Urging me to have a flu shot and have a mammogram. This evening we have 3 participants. All 3 of these men have been involved in the European theater of operations. They will be the last ones to speak on that particular operation. Next Thursday night we will have a film showing the other side of the picture, that is the German side of the war in Europe. And we have a lot to cover tonight. We're going to keep moving. Each of these men will participate about 30 to 35 minutes. And our first man is a man who was a local, native-born Rensselaer man. And I first got acquainted with Paul in high school. And it's with a great deal of pride and pleasure that I introduce Paul Zimmer.
Everybody asked me a lot of questions, but I don't have time tonight to answer them. I'll cut it very short. And I was in the 101st Airborne Division. And the 101st Airborne Division was the first airborne division the U.S. Army ever had. So we had to jump on the rest of them, and we did a pretty good job in World War II. We usually spearheaded the different invasions like Normandy and Holland and Bastogne. We were the ones that were locked in Bastogne for over 2 weeks, cut off from the U.S. Army for probably the closest U.S. Army troops to us was about 100 miles away. And so Ike used us for the spearhead, the different places. And so the big thing is, how did I get these film? These film are taken at 51 years ago. 51 years ago this week, we went into Holland September 17th, 1944, which was last Sunday. 51 years ago and last Sunday, and it happened, but the days of the week even fall on the same days of the week that was 51 years ago. Sunday was the 17th the other day. And so today is the 21st. We were fighting in Holland right now, had landed fighting in Holland 51 years ago right now. So how they get the film, the glider troopers, the glider pilots carried cameras with them as they took us into Holland. They piloted and flew the gliders, and they carried cameras, 8mm cameras. And so then they had a convention, they kept the movies, but they didn't do too much with them, and they had a convention in 50 years, and so they all took their movies with them to the convention. And then you'll see them talking here in the movies, telling about their flight, that the glider that they flew. And that was taken last year. This film was made last year. And how did I find it? I wasn't a glider pilot, I was a glider trooper, glider rider. And so, there's a man up here at Valparaiso who is a glider pilot. And he had a copy of this here film. And so I was visiting with him one day, and I got the film. And so don't think I didn't borrow it and make copies of it. I've made probably 30 copies of it already. and I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of it because it shows us from the time we left England, loaded on the gliders across the English Channel into Holland and over the German, over the German lines into Holland, and we were 72 days in Holland, locked in battle in Holland before we got out of there. It was a close one. We lost half our division there. Half our division is buried in the Holland Cemetery. I'm not going to say any more now, but here's a few things to watch for. You'll see after 6 minutes, about 6 minutes in the film, you'll see a glider by the name of, they'll have Helen on the side of it. When you see them, they've got writing all over the side, and you'll see the name Helen on one. That was the glider I rode in. I was my captain, his wife's name was Helen, so whoever the highest rank, they got to decorate some on the gliders, and you'll see writing all over the gliders. And so my captain's name was Helen. So I was the captain's radio operator, and I was chief of communications in our company. So I was in that glider with my captain, and so we be sure to watch and see the happy spirit on these Holland people. They were so happy to see us. We wore the American flag on our shoulder, and our division wore the Screaming Eagle on the other shoulder. And so watch the happy spirit you see these Holland people. When you see their faces, they're all so happy that we are there to free them from 6 years under the German occupation. And so they helped us every place they could. They showed us, we show them the map. They'd show us where the German strongholds were on the map, and they did everything they possibly could to help us in any way they could. And you'll see them, the ladies cooking the food in their kitchen and bringing it out on the battlefield to us, so we could have hot meals. So the women were not, nobody was, the Holland people, the women or children, nobody was afraid of death, because they'd faced it for 6 years, so death was nothing to them. They were just happy to see the Americans out there, and they helped us any way they could. So any way they could see possible or anything we needed, we'd ask, and they would try to do it for us. And at the break, when I take a look at my presents here, the Holland people sent at least $500 worth of presents to each of us. There was 500 of us went over, and they loaded us with presents as we went back, Blue Delta plates and everything. And with that, I'm going to stop because there's 2 more to come in for me. Paul?
My name is Douglas Wilmer, and I represent the World War II Glider Pilots Association. And this is their production of the invasion of Holland, Market Garden. Market is the airborne part of the operation, and the Garden is the ground forces part of the operation. This was on the 17th of September through the 25th of September, 1944. It's not our intention to completely cover and report Market Garden, but just to report the American glider effort. Parts of it will be shown, other parts of the operation will be shown to keep the objectives and efforts in complete context. This was by far the most ambitious of all the airborne operations of World War II. It shows the American glider pilot in his true mettle, and he does everything and more that the High Command asked him to do. This operation actually was in 3 parts and 3 major areas of responsibility. The first part is the British responsibility at Arnhem. This is the Rhine River, and they are going to drop across the Rhine River into Germany in these areas right here. This is Osterbeck and the landing zones for the British. The American 82nd Airborne Division will be dropped in the Nijmegen area at Oosterbeek, Mook, and Grave, their drop zones. The 101st has the responsibility in the Eindhoven area, and their drop zones are in the Zaan area. On the 17th of September, the front line was here along this canal. The objectives were to grab all the bridges and hold them in each one of these areas, and the British ground forces, led by the Irish divisions and tanks, were to race up this highway across the Rhine into Germany, and the war would be over by Christmas of 1944. Troops have been moved to the airfields from which major airborne effort covers everything from live ammunition to CO2 cartridges for their May West life vest. Since this route is going to be over water, the troops will be using life vest. Troops you see here are mostly from the 327th and the 401st Glider Infantry. These were all moved into this airfield on September the 15th, and supplies cover everything. Pinning the American flag on the shoulder is very important. It shows the Dutch that this is an American soldier. Last-minute services are held for the faithful, and of course this is the Catholic chaplain. Troops are leaving the hangar and going to show anything that in the way of German forces, where they are, what kind of forces are there, and so forth. The C-47s are taking pretty much of a beating. Here you see one going down in the distance. The paradrop you also see there in the distance. Back in England, the heavy muscle part of the airborne operation is getting ready. The loading of the gliders, bring in artillery pieces, loading jeeps. The glider CG-4A that you see here was built around a glider and 5 men. And here you see them loading one of the jeeps in this glider, and a mate right close to it will be the anti-tank gun. In this case, hopefully they'll land close enough together that the jeep will pull the gun to its assigned position on the ground. Here's checking and rechecking. It has to be done over and over again because nobody wants to take a chance of something coming loose in flight. Very disastrous results can happen when loads shift in flight. Gliders have to cut loose in most cases, and have to be very careful in lowering this tail so that the tail wheel doesn't fall and break.
Well, I think most of the time they were designed for 3,750 pounds, but I think most of the time they had about 5,000 pounds or so, or maybe more, because on that one and also on the German missions, when we got there and landed, the Jeep sank into the floor of the glider. And I'm sure the glider was designed to hold up to 3,750 with no sinking into the plywood floor.
7s and CG-4As are ready for takeoff in England. This is the first day's operation, and there will be a number of gliders to each one of the American divisions, plus a heavy glider mission to the British up in the Arnhem area. The writing and the graffiti on the side of the gliders pretty much speaks for themselves, and a great deal of effort in some cases were made to put the writings that you see here on the side of the gliders. And the humor, the American humor, is something else. General McCollop shows his support for this element of the division by going in gliders and riding in a glider into Holland, and he's told by the senior commander, troop carrier commander in the European theater, Colonel Whitaker. Off, the 300-foot tow rope is playing out, and the glider is up on its nose and then down until it gets some airspeed. It has very little surface control on its air surfaces. But the glider will take off first. It flies around 65 miles an hour. It takes off and gets above the tow plane. The tow plane will take off about 95 miles an hour. The formation that you see here takes a while to form up, and the glider pilots are flying without co-pilots, and this is going to average out to be about a 3-hour flight. And it's very exhausting on the glider pilot to be able to fly this long a period of time without any relief whatsoever, because he has to fly that glider continuously. There's no way of resting. There's no automatic pilot, and in most cases the airborne that's sitting beside him in the co-pilot seat has no flying training at all. And so the pilot will be flying this glider for 3 hours, forming.
Well, Holland, of course, was the longest. It was over 4 hours.
Formations are very vulnerable to the enemy fighter craft, and passing over some of the Belgium and Dutch towns. Here's an airborne officer sitting in the co-pilot seat. The weather's a little borderline. The takeoffs were delayed 4 hours before they were able to get off. Here we are in Holland. These planes or gliders are down. Most of them have made very soft landings, and more gliders coming in, as you can see here in a distance. "50 gliders are going in first into the 80-second drop zones up in the Groesbeck area, and then 50 gliders are going into the Zahn area in the 101st area of responsibility. Not too much flak right at the landing zones, but getting to the landing zones is where flak was experienced in great amounts in this particular operation. Gliders are coming in very nicely. They had large fields, and they're flying in around 70 miles an hour. These are flying in around 70 miles an hour, touching down probably around 60. The pathfinders on the ground have set up smoke to give them wind direction, and very much like these glider pilots train in America with fields with barbed wire fences. The glider pilots are staying with the troops. This is a case in which the nose has come open, was unhooked probably in flight, and the nose was started up before they actually stopped rolling, and that's what caused that to happen. The Dutch are very excited. This is the greatest day that they have experienced in many a year. They've been waiting 5 years for relief from the Germans, and in this part of Holland, they're very, very elated. A Jeep has gotten itself in one of the very many ditches that go through the fields here in order to drain the fields, and I'm sure with all this help that Jeep didn't stay in that ditch very long. This is one of the few accidents that happened. Two gliders collided in air over top of the drop zone. This is one. The other one, the glider pilot was killed. This one, you can see him with his flak suit still on, and it's in a way, really. The glider pilot is hurt here, and the 101st Troopers are trying to get he and the boy who flew in the co-pilot seat out of this pinning glider. It takes a little bit of doing, but an axe will do it, and these are steel frames, and the plexiglass has already been knocked out, and glider pilot is being extracted. Luckily, the Germans are not in evidence on the drop zone, or this would have been an impossible situation.
No.
You didn't go into Holland with a black suit?
No, well, I had one, but I sat on it. I did not wear it. Yeah, I sat on it. No, I did not wear it.
Did any particular reason why you didn't put it on?
I thought that I would, if I probably got anything, it would be from the ground. And so I put it under my rear end and my feet more than I did in back, because I figured I didn't think I was expecting too much from flak towers as I would be from ground fire from flying over. Because when they briefed us, if you recall, we left England going east over the North Sea and went down across the border. And when we were crossing into Holland, I figured even though it was enemy territory, there would be very few people that would be shooting at you from a flak tower. So I took a chance and thought if I got any ground fire at all, it would be from underneath. That's the reason why I did it. No other than it was just a pure lucky guess. I did not get shot at. My glider was not hit, to my knowledge, by any ground fire after I landed. I did not notice any holes in my glider when I landed.
The medics are very much in evidence in this whole operation, and the Jeeps have been ready for this for a long time. Dutchtown, first part of the operation, the Dutch were going to church, and this looks like church is over with, and some medical units are going through town. This is probably Eindhoven, or could be Zaan, in that area, because these are 101st Troopers, medical troopers. Now this is the 82nd area up in the Nijmegen area, and plasma, as in every war, is much in demand, and the Dutch have opened up all their hospitals, their schools, every place that could be used as a hospital, and doctors and nurses are very much in evidence, and you'll notice that there are quite a number of German prisoners waiting for medical attention here also. For some of these men, they'll be patched up and be right back in the thick of things in a day or two. Others will be evacuated just as soon as transport gets up the highway. And the highway is open back to Belgium, that these all be transported back. Even though there was an airfield right close to Nijmegen, it was not discovered until a few days later. C-47s could have landed and brought in supplies and soldiers and taken out the wounded, like was done in Normandy around St. Mary-le-Lys. General McCollop and his staff putting together all the information on the CPs and getting things in order. Neat corps of fighting troops are now being assembled and taken off for the areas where they're needed the most. The Germans were not surprised very long. They stay in there and start working at it. Within a few hours after the first glider, which took off, some gliders landed in the German area, and against orders, one officer did take in a complete set of plans marked with all the objectives, zones, timing zones, landing zones, and the Germans had this within a few hours after the gliders landed. So they knew pretty much where to cut the roads, where to put their most effort, even though
our CG-4A, now it's tall at the top and it's shaped down and narrow at the bottom. On the Holland invasion, if you recall, I was carrying in a Jeep full of medical supplies. And the only way, if you recall, getting out of that thing without staying there and having the nose up is to crawl on your stomach and back out. Well, the airborne infantry guy had got out and kicked out that emergency door. So I was the last guy out. I was crawling on my stomach, backing out that door. And I ended up with my rear end in that door. And at that time, I weighed 145 pounds and I was in fight. But I felt like that my rear end had a bull target. And every German had it. And I'll tell you, I still went around kind of pucker up, because I really truly thought every German bastard up there was going to shoot me right in the rear end.
As I said before, the Dutch are very helpful. The Dutch underground, very efficient and do a great job. Not only doing this mission here, but all during the war, before and after this mission. Dutch, good. The drops were almost perfect. During the night, Eindhoven was heavily bombed by the German Air Force, and gliders will be put into the air. However, it has to be postponed 4 hours due to fog and bad weather in the morning. The more writings on the side of the gliders, and George F. Brennan, who will have a bad day before this is over. Some other glider pilots with a mascot. The D-ring that fits in the back of, and the D-ring that fits in the glider. 300 feet of tow rope will stretch between the two. They're using single tows on the Holland mission. In the States, however, everybody has been trained on double tows, and if they had a goes into the next day, which is supposed to be the last glider mission, is postponed for three additional days. These are some good pictures of glider takeoffs. Gliders have a habit of being overweight, being overloaded, and even though the glider pilot watches and tries to keep that from happening, troops will sneak in, particularly those who have been in combat before, continually run out of things, and mostly ammunition. And extra box or two of ammunition weighs a little bit.
What kind of
weigh in this case, and again you'll see all kinds of landings, but mostly good ones. Here are a couple of gliders coming in together, and probably one has a Jeep and the other one has a trailer, or an anti-tank gun in it. And they try to stay close like that so that that they can get into action as quickly as possible. These are probably fields there at the Zahn area, and glider coming in with his spoilers on, slowing him up and coming on in. Fields are large, and there'll be room for more gliders in behind these. And that was the design. Germans in this area are laying off with mortars and 88s down in the best area, and as the gliders and tow planes are coming in, if they make a turn coming in or going out over the best area, they're really clobbered by the anti-aircraft fire. And until the 327th gets in, the Airborne doesn't have enough clot to knock out the best area. They do a little bit later on, but this is the good bit of the 327th is being delivered here in the Zahn area. That's the 101st area, and they are bringing in much needed troops as well as supplies. The gliders will bring in a great deal of supplies, landmines, ammunition, and the things to carry them. Jeeps. Jeeps are very important in the Airborne. It gives them the only mobility that they're able to muster, and it was.
And of course, Market Garden, as you remember there, we there again had a bad experience for the simple reason when our squadron hit the channel, you couldn't get through. The weather was bad, and most of them turned back, but the commanding officer of the 81st Squadron took us on through, and there was only about 6 out of the 30-some-odd gliders got into Holland from the 81st Squadron because of the weather. Of the trip across the Rhine, the flak in Market Garden was the roughest because it was just solid, and I guess that's the reason we didn't make it, because I know when we got on the ground in Eindhoven, and I did have infantry then. I believe that was 101st we took into there, and I stayed with them until we got to Nijmegen.
Well, there's one chute comes out, the second chute comes out, but not the whole crew does not get out of that C-47. And a little bit further on, you'll see another one coming straight in. In the best area, they're really being knocked pretty good by the German gunners. The gliders that are coming in are there's C-47 coming straight in. One of the glider pilots, Dale Oliver, is pinned to the ground by one of those C-47s and barely escapes with his life.
The wind had knocked a hole in the fabric of the glider before we got into Holland, and even the troopers we had, the infantry squadron, they were brave people, because I was afraid that the fabric was going to be torn off of that aircraft, but we had one that got up and even got a hold of the fabric to hold it.
Unbuckled his seatbelt.
Unbuckled his seatbelt.
Holland was the worst mission for me.
It was a CG-4A?
Yeah, CG-4A. But
Did you have a co-pilot?
No, had a airborne sergeant. I never had a co-pilot again.
Okay, had it been flight tested?
Mine did, but better. I was glider engineering officer of the squadron.
Oh, did your squadron try to test fly all the...
I test flew most of the gliders that we worked on, myself.
And did you get a lot of ground power going into Holland?
Not as much. We did right at the LZ, but the worst part about Holland was the weather. When we took off from Welford Park, we had clear weather until we hit the channel, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And the tow plane, all I could see was about 5 feet of rope out in front of me. I could not, that's about all. It was just practically dense.
Well, that's interesting. How'd you keep on tow? By the angle of the tow rope?
I am not too sure of the answer to that, because
It was single tow.
It was a single tow, thank goodness. And while we were in the stuff, it seemed like we were in there for hours, but I know we weren't. It was only a matter of minutes, because he was climbing as fast as he could. We went into the stuff in formation, in the regular V formation. While I was in there, we hadn't been in there more than a few minutes, and a glider wing came right across in front of him like that. Another
How
glider.
close do you think it was?
He couldn't have been more than 10 feet out in front of me. He brushed my rope. The glider wing. Well, I knew if I saw that wing that the other part of him was over there someplace. I knew also there was 2 tow planes up there close together, and that's what had me worried. And frankly, I was sweating because I didn't know whether we were going to make it or not. Next thing I know, the other glider never showed up again. And what happened up in front with the airplanes, I don't know. I don't know where they went. But when we finally popped out of the stuff, we were possibly 10, 12,000 feet, which was much higher than our allotted flying altitude. We were the only plane in the sky.
Test glider flights are in 252 B-24s of loss of the American paratroopers, a dike being held, again, the 9 Megan area, and the drop zones are in Groesbeck and Moke and Grave in this area. The Germans are now sending in reinforcements from the areas around, and
in Holland, I was a flight serial leader. I went in on the 3rd phase. We were grounded for 5 days because of weather, and you know how it is sweating out 5 days, getting up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Finally, we got off after 4 or 5 days, and I let in a flight leader of 25 gliders. Colonel Monroe was the tow pilot, and there was approximately a 50-mile stretch of gliders behind us, which I didn't know at the time. The weather was nothing to brag about. We went over the channel, flying through scattered clouds, and it was over Holland in the flat country near Idaho, where we began to take a lot of flak. Of course, we had very good air cover. We had fighter Typhoons, P-47, the various types of fighter planes. And near Uden, U-D-E-N, I took a hit in my glider. The wings sounded like something going through it, just rocked the whole ship. And number 3 glider and plane in my formation, they got a direct hit, and the plane was seen going down. The glider cut, and then we lost a 2nd glider further on near Idaho, I believe it was.
glider serials are sweating it out as Connie has
30 and 40, I guess, caliber stuff was coming at us. And my glider was hit many, many times in small arms fire. Then the stuff really started hitting the tow planes that were coming in one at a time. They were coming in not in formation anymore. They were just coming in from all directions. They had evidently run into the same thing. And the fire was coming up pretty heavy then. And in fact, one tow plane was hit and landed not too far from us, completely gone. Amazingly, that glider, when we looked at it a little later, after everybody got out of it, looked like a sieve from small arms fire, but nobody in the glider got hit.
And you notice here that these troops have come through flak, and most of them have flak wounds. The exploding flak really does go everywhere, and of course you can see he's been hit 2 or 3 times. And the only thing that the medics can do here is just bandage the wounds and then get them to an aid station where the doctor will decide whether or not to remove the flak or leave them in. There's many a glider pilot and many a glider trooper who are carrying around flak today that has decided just to leave it where it was. Meal in the middle of a war is almost unbelievable. And using good Dutch china as well.
Flew into Grossbeck. Yeah.
First day, second day?
We were in the third day, I believe it was.
What did you carry into Holland?
I carried full infantry load. There's 14 infantrymen myself.
Again, you didn't have any profile?
No. When we first got on the ground in Holland, we set up an outpost on a railroad cut in between one of the infantry units and the engineer unit.
The planes, the tug pilots, added about another 500 feet to our 1,200-foot altitude. And so when I came over to Moss River to our landing ZO in Graaf, Holland, I decided I had to use my drag chute. And we got into the area very good. We all made safe landings outside the tube.
So you came in about 1,800 feet then, or 1,700?
We came in approximately 1,700 feet, which was...
I think my story is going to be a little different than the usual. There was an article in the paper, and the local paper had an article, Training kept Muller's division ready for action. I guess most of you had seen this. My first experience in the Army was when I was about 17 or 18 years old. To explain, we've lived in the Midwest now 28 years. The company moved us around from New Jersey. Our high school one teacher, English teacher, had a reserve commission, and he tried to get some of us to take part in a CMTC camp, which is Citizens Military Training Camp. And so I signed up, as a couple of us did, and we spent 1 month in Camp Dix, this camp called then. And we did the firing, and Camp Dix, incidentally, is a huge base. In fact, to get out to the firing range, you take a narrow gauge railroad to get out there for your shooting experience. We were married in New Jersey, 41, and in 42, my number was coming up, and I saw on the front page of the Newark Evening News article saying those who would be interested in applying for leadership in the Coast Artillery anti-aircraft officer training be willing to apply, do so. And I did, and I was informed to go to Fort Dix at that time, and I took tests and was interviewed and so forth, and they said I would be notified, and then I was notified that I was accepted for anti-aircraft Coast Artillery training for officer. I had to wait for apparently a class. I did my basic training in Fort Eustis, Virginia, which incidentally is in the area where my son lives, who's a retired major in the Air Force. Then, after completion of that, then I went to Camp Davis, North Carolina, and went through basic officer training there. And that was quite an experience. In officer training, why they put you through pressure in various ways. First, we had actually, I guess you'd say, 4 parades a day. When you went to class, it was a parade. When you come home for chow, come back to the barracks for chow, it was a parade. Going back for class, coming back. And you had to have everything just so in your barracks. You had to have your tent pegs and all that sort of thing on the shelf just so. And you had to have your mattress folded just so with envelope fold in the corner. And I got, which was quite a surprise to the other fellows, that I would get superior for having a vertical bed. At graduation, why, different fellows got around, talked to the bird dog and said, how did you determine a vertical bed? And he said, well, I looked down at my fly and got the vertical bed at the corner of the bed. When we went to class, why, I said it was a parade, and it was. And the bird dog would be a half a step behind you, and you had to keep your eyes on the nape of the neck of the soldier ahead of you. And this one time, I sort of glanced a little bit without turning my head, and I was told by the bird dog, who was a half a step behind me, keep your eyes to the front, mister. And then, do you own property over there, mister? So that's the way it was. Then when you enter the barracks for class, the bird dog would stand right alongside, and as you took your hat off, you had to do it just at a certain time as you went through the doorway. When you came back for lunch, you had to check your clothes, because it would maybe be a couple buttons unbuttoned, purposely done, and it was that type of pressure. So I got through that all right. Then I was commissioned. Dolores presented me with my first second lieutenant bars, and I was assigned to a half-track outfit on the Cape, 574th half-track. And I had various jobs there, but as soon as I arrived, I was given a drafting board and some tools, because my background was architectural drafting, and I had to lay out a new headquarters for the Coast Artillery in Camp Edwards, out on the Cape. So in a sense, that sort of held me back, because I was missing out on training. But I had various positions there. I was, when we went down to Louisiana to work out with for maneuvers, working out with the Abe Lincoln Division, I was the mess officer on the troop train from the Cape down to Louisiana. I was the liaison officer between our battalion and group headquarters, and various jobs like that. Down in Louisiana, I had to put the battalion through the gas chamber, and I was in the gas chamber all day long, and so long that the straps on my gas mask turned color, but I got through that all right. Then we put all the men and gave them, of course, every man was issued a tube for mustard gas. And then they came through with everyone, and they put a drop. First you put your ointment here, and then they put a drop on the ointment and a drop up here to prove that the ointment worked. And then here, of course, you got about the size of a quarter of a blister. And here there was no reaction. And there was no problem to you. It didn't do any harm, but I had the scar. And there's still a little slight scar on my arm. At that time, the Allies over in Europe were getting air superiority. And we were getting a flood of newly commissioned second lieutenants. And gradually they were getting rid of them. But I was being kept on for one reason or other. I even was responsible for a basketball team. So I had fun there too. At night, the basic training for the half tracks, which had a turret on it with 250 caliber machine guns. And of course, the main situation in supporting an infantry group or division, battalion, is to make sure you had a proper field of fire and to be lined up in the direction where you expected the enemy to come. And we'd go out in the evening, the men did, and they would have to have their tractor dug in and camouflaged. And when I mean dug in, you dug a hole big enough for the whole half-track to go into. And so then inspectors came around to see how you did and that sort of thing. Then finally, and then we went down to Louisiana, as I mentioned, to maneuvers. And when you go on maneuvers, you are checked from all phases of operation of your division. And so we were checked out and we came out very favorably. I was the last man to be released from the outfit. And I think the outfit, 574th F-Track outfit, went overseas. But I never did learn as to how they made out. Excuse me for my voice. I had something here to show you, but I don't recall it. Okay. Then I was pulled aside, and I was included with 4 other officers and 1 captain, and we took black AWOLs over on board ship at the point of a gun, and they were serious AWOLs, and they were being transported over to Italy to be truck drivers. When I got over to Italy and we landed, troops on board ship, landed on the side of a sunken ship just outside of Naples. And then I was sent, myself and others who were being changed to infantry, to Caserta to attend a school for transferring and getting all your new training to be an infantry officer. The program was very rigid. I recall a captain who was in front of me, and you had to climb over a pole with a pack on and your rifle, and he slipped and fell into the woods on some rocks and broke a leg. So you had to keep your head down, and it was, as I say, very rigid. I then, from there, I was transferred to the, thank you, help yourself. Thanks, I need it. Then I was transferred to the 88th Division. Excuse me. And I'll say a combat division. This is my map, which was referred to in the article, and you can see how it's been patched. I repatched it again. And I had this folded up in my map case. And this is the map I used overseas in combat. Now, one thing I did want to do, this is my helmet that I had in combat. And this is the liner. This is the liner, which in training, why you use this and you didn't use this as well, okay? And I'd like to pass this around. This became your shaving kit, your shaving mug, your bathtub, whatever you want to call it. But I thought I'd bring it. Now, this was mine in combat.
Dolores asked me recently, how come you got it? Well, I hope to tell you before I'm finished here. But I let you pass it all around and see what the helmet is like. Yes, it is heavy. But before I go any farther, I'd like to say this. I'm only one of thousands of men and women who served in the service. And I'm only here because I've been asked to give my side of the story, my experience. I also have, and I'm a member of the 88th Division Association. This is what I was going to show you. I couldn't find it. When I was with the half-track outfit, I got the idea to have some publicity and fellowship within the within the outfit. And so my dad made this letterhead back in New Jersey, and he made a lot of copies and mailed it all to me. I gave it to the first sergeant, and he used this for publicity within the outfit, which the colonel appreciated, which helped me too. Well, and I know this is a large group, and we have a quarterly magazine that comes out from the association. It's called The Blue Devil, and I'll tell you why that is so. And I like to pass this out mainly because there are scenes in here showing the rugged country of Italy that we had to fight in. This is a small one, but there is a big one here. Look at it, yeah. Oh, I think you'll find it. Here's, you'll see this. This is the rugged country that we in Italy had to fight in. So I'll try it on this side. I put paper clips in and I was A Company. So if there's A Company, I say that with a little pride. Organized here, yeah. The 88th Division was activated in the First World War. It went over as a division, but it did not get active in the war. There were a few elements of the 88th Division that participated, and they had a few casualties. The 88th Division was here in this second war, activated in July of '42 at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. And it was online in Italy 1 year and 7 months later. Now, I say that because here there was civilians. It had been said that the 88th Division will never go overseas, but they did. In fact, the 88th Division was the first division of civilians, as you might say, thoroughly trained to be a fighting force that was in combat. Major General Sloan, he was meticulous for discipline, and with his approach, why the men became a good fighting force. He was able to stay in charge of the 88th Division to include 3 months of combat when he became medically ill and had to be sent back to the States. And he was replaced by his second in command of the division, Major General Kendall. Now, the 88th Division, as I said, is the first all-draftee division to be sent overseas and to get into combat. After training in Oklahoma, they too went down to Louisiana and went through their maneuvers. Now, that training in Louisiana, any division that went through that was very closely watched and checked out, and because of their performance, they were sent to Morocco, Africa, and they were there for 2 months, and then for training, and then they went on to Italy. Now, Italy, they landed at Naples. And I'm only showing this as where Naples is located. That's Naples. And that was the beginning, and there's the first line of combat right there. So they were just outside of the first line of combat. They were always the spearhead of any advancement. There were other divisions there, but they were the best, had the best performance, and therefore was the one that was pushing out. In 9 months, they had 11,000 casualties. That's a lot of casualties, and that's because they were out front all the time. Then, there's one thing that I should mention, and that is that General Sloan, being that he was for discipline of his outfit, he had to be buttoned up, he had to have the proper saluting, everything, but he developed a sense of pride, esprit de corps, as it was called, and yet the men, even though he was so strict in his discipline, they revered the man for his leadership. And it paid dividends because they were the ones, the 88th Division is the ones that ended up at the Po Valley, Brennerow Pass, into Austria at the war's end. They were the first in Rome, and all the way through, it was that way. Then, the Military Review issue of October 1987 gave an indication about where the 88th Division stood in their rating. And strangely enough, in the top 9 German divisions, the 88th Division was 5th. And so then a team got together to find out why was the 88th Division so good. And they broke it down as they would as to manpower. There were 7 basic elements to try to determine why the 88th Division was so good. And in the manpower, the first echelon of men came from the state of Delaware, New Jersey, New York, and New England. Then the Midwest and the Southwest. And the Mexicans, American Mexicans, were played a prominent part in the drives of the 88th Division. So that was typical. There wasn't anything special about it. These were just regular office workers, farmers, whatever you want to call it. So they were no different from any other division from that standpoint. Cadre. The cadre, the general, he had some of his officers go down to Fort Bragg and check out the cadre that had already been indicated. And they washed out a few, but basically it was the same type of cadre any other division would have. Stability. Was there any strip outs? In other words, take out cadre after you're organized and to help support another division in the organization. And there was nothing up to that. Quality of leadership. Well, they had quality of leadership, but all the divisions had quality of leadership. Length of quality of training. They all went through the same basic training, so there was nothing special there. And the quality of training, nothing special there. But they came upon one thing that was different. And it all went back to Major General Sloan and his leadership. It wasn't just the pride of the outfit, but to use the term, it was the competence of accomplishments. This is the one thing that in Louisiana apparently solidified the esprit de corps of the outfit, so that it was the pride in the division's competence and accomplishments. It was a step further than just the esprit de corps. Now I do have something to show you. At one point, four of us were given a special mission, so I was permitted to get into Rome. And I went to the Vatican. And I had been told to see the Pope and what the routine was. So I bought a crucifix for a close friend's mother, Kitty Kelly in the office, the architect's office where I worked, accompanied by, she was Catholic, and I bought a little religious medal. And I bought a postcard, not knowing that when you went in, they gave you a picture of the Pope. And and it was interesting as a Protestant how people received the Pope. And he came in side door with an assistant, I'd call him assistant, bodyguard, what have you. And he went up on the platform and he spoke in 3 languages, Italian, French, and English. And he welcomed everybody, and then he blessed everybody. Then he came down to the railing, and he received anybody who wanted to be received. So I tried to get to him, and somebody was always getting in front of me. And finally, he stuck his hand out to shake hands, and as he did so, he said, "American?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And then he said, "Lieutenant?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And then I said, "Would you kindly bless these?" So I held them out in my hand, and he did so. Now I just took, these are the 2, paid 5 cents for this, and I took the picture of the 2 cards I had that were blessed by the Pope, Pope Pius XII. So that was to me a highlight of my experience. And I got to see other things. I came across, I don't know where this came from, but the other day I got my box out of all my wartime stuff, and I came across this. So, and apparently when you saw pictures of kids or families waving, this is what they were. Then one other time, going down the road, might as well throw it all out. Going down a highway. This is after the breakthrough in the northern part of Italy, and you could see the planes strafing way down. And here was a barn and a couple horses with their flesh burning a little bit, and things of this sort, and trucks and blah blah. And I was walking along, and then I saw this. And this is an officer's map case. And strange things happened. So I opened it up, and there's my name in it. Oberleutnant Muller with the umlaut. These are his pencils. This was his pen. And foolishly, he had a couple snapshots in it, and I threw them away when you're angry at the enemy. And this is the pen he had in it. Italian women would come along as you're going down the highway with a dishpan of vino, and with one glass, or 1 cup, whatever it was, and they'd walk along and dip it in, take a sip. Another woman would have chicken eggs, and they tasted good. You take an egg, take a pencil, hole in the bottom, and don't Oh, they tasted good. So I see you standing at the sidelines here. So it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope that it was of some interest.
Thank you, Norm. We appreciate your presentation very much. Doris Schreiner, when you were separated from the service, didn't you have to turn in your helmet?
I'm wondering how he got to keep it. After I took a bath in mine.
Believe me, folks, I would be the last one to ever get up here and hint that Norman stole one.
Well, I'll tell you the answer. When the war was over, and incidentally there was no fanfare for us, one GI said, this is it. It's finished, and that's it. And that's all there was to it. And you were so glad that it was over. And after a while, then they start switching men around. And I was being switched to another outfit, getting ready for CBI, China, Burma, India. And of course, then the festivities all concluded, and that was it. I would like to just say one thing. And I like to read this, and this is in the interest of infantrymen. And this was written by Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, Commanding General of the Army Ground Forces. He was killed in action the 25th of July in '44. Our Army is no better than its infantry, and victory will come only when and as our infantry gains it. The price will be predominantly what the infantry pays. These days, the entire nation is following operations on its war maps. It is to be noted that the front lines of these maps are simply where the infantryman is. It is true he is supported magnificently by artillery and air, but this support is behind and above him. There is nothing in front of him but the enemy.
This article that Norman showed you is available at the front desk. Just help yourself. It's in the World War II supplement of the Republican. I just want to thank Fozzie's, who gave us the 46-inch TV at a very, very nominal price, far less than their usual rental, and Jackson's, who gave us 25 extra chairs for tonight and told us to keep them for the series. And as you can see, I've stripped for action. As Mary and I left to come here tonight, we found out we're in the process of being made grandparents again. So anyway, your bowl of vino and your raw eggs are...
Mr. Eugene Lewis, and very few people have heard of Eugene Lewis, but you just asked for Jim Lewis. Where you are, Jim?
While you're still here, I want to make a correction that was in the paper. Said I was going to talk on Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the Balkans. I sure don't want to get fooled up with those guys over there in the Balkans right now. I wasn't in the Balkans. I have a movie, but I didn't want to use it. I have a tape of Italy, and I felt it was probably better to speak on where I'd been and a few things that was happening while I was there. I left Jasper County in 1941, was drafted October 24th before Pearl Harbor, went down to Fort Benjamin Harrison, went through the usual tests down there and physicals. Then they sent me to Camp Wheeler, Georgia. My stay down there was short because I had 4 weeks training. December the 7th come by, they stopped our training cycle, and you were ready to go to war then. I remember that day. We had a general that later I had, and he gave us a talked the next day, and more truth in it than I even wanted to realize. Some of the memories of Camp Wheeler, I was, for 2 weeks, you were not to go off base. The third week, I went into Macon, Georgia. Never will forget. The first little restaurant I seen said, "Niggers and soldiers not allowed." I hate to think what category I got in, but things has changed even during the war. But from there, I went to Camp Dix, New Jersey, and I thought that was great because my paper said go to Port Embarkation, Port Dix, New Jersey. And I thought we were going to work on the docks, not knowing what Port Embarkation was. But when I got there, I found out that through nothing but suntans when we had to wear to go up there, and I got there in the middle of December. It was cold. They put us in tents. Then I had a corporal come around and say, "So many names, follow him." And they took me back to a barracks in, which I felt was on the way up anyway. And the first thing they did, because the War Department did not have time to change it, one of the few people that had to have I had to go and have my picture taken, printed, because you had to have identification before the war in order to leave the United States. I still carry that passport, and we didn't need it. But when I get back to the barracks, I found out that I'd been put in a machine gun company, scared the dickens out of me, because I read in history that the life of a machine gunner was about 60 seconds. The first part of January, they loaded us on a train and took us to the docks to board a ship. Rumors were we were going through the Panama Canal, we were going here or there. We were standing on the docks, and we were to travel on a British ship. As we were standing on the docks, the British ship caught fire. There we were with our barracks bags and all of our paraphernalia. We stayed there for about 7 hours, and they finally realized we wasn't going to get on the ship. They loaded us on a train and run us back to Fort Dix. When they finally got a boat available, we boarded a ship called the Santa Rosa. We left New York Harbor, was out about 2 hours. The submarine run us back. We waited till dark and headed up the coast. Submarines run us into Nova Scotia. Stayed in Nova Scotia one day, headed towards Greenland, then Iceland, then to the British Isles. I landed in Ireland. When I seen that green grass as we went in, I swore they'd never get me on a ship again. Ireland was our training ground, and I'm probably going to tell you people something that you didn't know. We were stationed in Northern Ireland on the border of Southern Ireland. Southern Ireland was a neutral country, whether many people knew that or not. Southern Ireland was a neutral country all during the war, which always baffled me when the British Isles was fighting a war, and you got a country in there that was neutral. But we did our training in the British Isles, I mean in Northern Ireland. I walked a lot of miles, walked a lot of peat bogs. Many peat bogs and potatoes is about all I seen there. I did go to Belfast one weekend. We were about 50 miles from Belfast, and being a farm boy and didn't know too much, I started throwing rocks at a swan to see it fly. One of them bobbies got me. And, told me he had a place for me to stay overnight. I told him that I would believe I'd rather go back to camp and stay all night with him. But we stayed there and trained for about 3 more months. Then our battalion was selected to go to Scotland, which is another beautiful country. Went to Scotland to train with commandos. Kind of scary because you knew they evidently had something in mind for you. But we trained there until the latter part of September, the 1st of October. They loaded us on a British ship and stayed on that ship until the time we landed in North Africa, November the 7th. But I want to tell you, on that ship, and a lot of you women out there, I'll tell you what we ate 4 days a week. Tripe. How many of you know what tripe is? It's the lining of a sheep's stomach. They make a gravy out of it. They put a piece of bread on your plate and slop the tripe on. That's your meal. You had all kind of tea, but mind you, when we took the commando training, we were attached to the British. We boarded that ship and was on it for just under 4 weeks. The reason we was on it so long because they were getting the convoy ready to go to Africa. The rumors was we was going to Norway or Sweden, and we went the other way. But we had no idea, but I was on a troop of 7 men that had one objective. That was to knock the floodlights out of a port somewhere. We got to the Straits of Gibraltar, not knowing where we were at. A day before we landed, they told us that we were landing at Algiers. My responsibility was, along with 6 others, was to land at the port and knock out the searchlights over the port. Mind you, the British were landing us. They loaded us on at 10:30. We were to land at 1 o'clock. It was a Higgins plywood assault boat, 2 V8 Ford engines, and 2 British officers running it. 7 of us laying on the deck, and we were to land at Algiers harbor. Fumbled around after quite a while, and we were getting pretty well beat up. Finally, I heard one of the British officers say to the others, "We're lost. Let's go back to the mothership." So he opened that 2 V8 engines up, and away we went. About 15 minutes later, we were eating sand. He'd went the wrong way, and we landed. When the history book says that we landed at 1 o'clock, we landed at 11:30. Not knowing where we were at, we had no searchlights to look for. The officer and 1 corporal and 5 of us set, waited for it to get daylight. We didn't have to wait till daylight because at 1 o'clock, pardon my English, but all hell broke loose. About 10 or 12 miles from us. So he had landed us 12 miles on the wrong beach. That was British. So when it started getting daylight around 4 o'clock, our officer felt that we better go towards where all the fireworks were. We started walking. We walked in about 150 yards. There was a road. Knowing all the fighting was to our left, we started down this road. We went about a mile, mile and a half, and here comes a cavalry troop coming towards us. We're going this way, they're coming this way. We were fighting the Vichy French. I didn't know what a Vichy French was. None of the other 6 fellas did. So we kept walking. The Vichy French walked, the whole column walked this way, we walked this way, we waved at them, we were fighting them. Somebody forgot to tell them what we looked like, and they forgot to tell us. But about noon, we arrived in Algiers, caught up with our company, and set up in a defensive position over Algiers. We sat there for, I think, 2 days. And if you remember history, there was an Admiral Darling, or I believe his name was the ambassador with Vichy French. He committed suicide or somebody shot him. And they declared an armistice. The first time in my life, and never heard it again. I heard we were way up on a hill looking down into Algiers. There was a 2-seated convertible with a man riding on the back of it, tooting ceasefire. I didn't know what it was, but they told me it was ceasefire. And that was about the end of the Algerian campaign. But I did make a trip from a few days later. The word was that our some of our stuff had, especially our kitchens, had landed at Bone, which is up the coast. So being in a machine gun company, they mounted a machine gun on a weapons carrier, and I and another fellow was their air patrol, go up to get our kitchens at Bone. No troops had been up there yet. It was a road along the Mediterranean all the way. When we got to Bone, as we went into Bone, the British paratroopers were landing, taking the airfield. So it shows you how sharp the American Army was at that time. I called American Army a civilian army at that time because I think we all were just a bunch of civilians, didn't know what was going on. I had never shot a heavy weapon, 30 caliber water machine gun. And I was an ammunition carrier for them. It wasn't until then we sent us up into Tunisia to guard an airport. And at that time, the Germans were still over in Libya and fighting that way. And we went up to guard this airport. All we was guarding was keeping the Arabs out. The American Army and the British Army did not realize you had to have supply lines. We were some 200 miles from all of our port back at Algiers, so our supply line was pretty slim. We had very few victuals to eat. So there's a German plane that had wrecked and had a red piece of cloth. It was about 4 foot by 5 foot red piece of cloth. What we kept was keeping the Arabs out of the area there. We used to take that piece of cloth and go over and trade it to the Arabs for 2 dozen eggs, and then send 2 guys back to kick thunder out of them to get the cloth back so we could do it the next day. That's what we survived on it for about a week and a half. Then the Germans finally found out where we were, backed us up to Sned Station, and we had our first combat at Sned Station. We had quite a few casualties. Then we were attached to the 1st Armored Division, which we had a lot of praise for them because they had pretty tanks. They took us out in Kasserine Pass and put my company up on a little hill because they were waiting for the German tanks to come. The next day they did come. We sat on that hill and looked down. It was like being at a football game, but a lot of fires, a lot of tanks being burnt, and we thought we were just kicking the thunder out of them. We lost all but 10 of our tanks. The next thing we knew, the next day, an airplane flew over, dropped a package, and said, "You're already 12 miles behind the line. Do what you can to get out." So my company commander that night, he decided that we tear down the gun, throw the parts away so the Germans couldn't get it. He was going to try and lead us from 12 miles back through the German lines. One of our mistakes was we had a chaplain that was with a German prisoner. Somehow I got on the tail end of the line, and they were trying to carry this prisoner ahead, and we got out there about a mile in the desert. The rest of the column went on. When it got daylight, the prisoner, 4 people, and the chaplain, and 2 other fellows besides myself, and the Germans, all they had to do was come up with an armored car and circled us all up, started marching us to the rear. We got on the main road, going back. The American planes started strafing the roads, and everybody run to the edge of the road. Another fellow and I run way out and got in an irrigation ditch, and when the Germans started hollering for them to come back, we stayed in that irrigation ditch. Wondered after we did if that was a good thing to do, because there we were 12 miles behind the lines. 3 days later, we got through the lines. That was basically the fighting around Kasserine Pass. Being we lost 600 men captured in my battalion. I was a part of the reorganization of it. I went from the 2nd platoon to the 1st platoon. And that's an easy way to get a promotion, because I went from a private to a corporal. Had 1 squad. We fought through the rest of Africa till we got up around Tunis and Bizerta. There was a hill 609 that was the hinge of the German defense. My battalion, my regiment took that hill 609, and being in machine gun company, when you take an objective that way, you're to hold it with the machine guns. Never will forget that evening. Our lieutenant went up and would watch the flashes and selected a place for us to go. I had a second gunner by the name of Andy Anderson. He was carrying the tripod. A guy by the name of Smith was carrying the gun. And he takes us up. He said, "I want it right here. The counterattack will come this way." and you're to stop it. 10 minutes later, he come back and he says, the rifle company wants you to move over 10 yards. We picked it up, we moved 10 yards, and just got the gun set up. The lieutenant comes back and he says, now we gotta move farther. Andy Anderson was from Kentucky and pretty hot-headed. He picked up that tripod with one hand. He went over to this position. He takes it and throws it off. Lo and behold, there was a German hid up there, threw it right on him. My hair hadn't straightened out yet. Screaming and hollering, and finally found out what it was all about. But that was basically the end of the African campaign. We stayed there for a few weeks, and they ordered us to go back to Oran and train and reorganize. We went by truck. Some of them went by train, but we went by truck 1,000 miles. And if you ever rode on a 6x6, 1,000 miles, it isn't like a Cadillac. We stayed near the French Foreign Legion, which was an experience. It's pretty gory, but those French Foreign Legion people had one way. Whenever they accomplished the mission and killed a few of the enemy, they always cut off an ear and hung it on their vest up here. Some of them had 3 ears, some of them had 1 ear. Then the Sicilian Campaign was on, and it was coming to an end, and so the 36th Division had made a landing at Salerno. The Germans were pushing them back. We were supposed to be D plus 4 or 5, but being they was pushing them back, they put us on ships real quick on landing crafts, and we went to Salerno and landed at Salerno. Went up through Italy. Italy, if most of you people don't realize, and I think Norman did a little telling you about the mountains. You never found any flat ground. You always found a hill ahead. You were up in the mountains, and when it got to be November, December, you'd have a foot of snow you were in. No vehicles could get up there. All our supplies came to us by mule train, and wounded had to come back down on mule train. They'd carry them back from. But we crossed the Volturno River 3 times, the Rapido River twice. I don't know how in the world you can cross the same one going north all the time. But it seemed like every time you just got straightened around from getting across one river, you were crossing the same river again. I got to Casino, which was probably one of the vicious fighting, probably of the war. I watched them bomb the monastery, which is sad. They felt that the Germans were using it. I was within 300 yards one time of it. I don't believe the Germans were using it, but I was only a sergeant, so my word didn't mean it. But they did bomb it, and it is restored now. Casino probably was, like I said, one of the toughest battles. I never will forget when we went across the plain to come in behind Casino, made a night attack across, and by the way, those night attacks wake you up too. Our rifle company was ahead of us, and they got in a minefield, and we were, before it got daylight, we were within 100 yards of the road, and where the hill went up, and if we could get to that point, you would have a little cover to set up your machine guns and at least have a fighting chance. That 100 yards, 2 of us had already talked to engineers, and there was bouncing Bettys. which is a landmine that has 3 prongs. You step on that thing, it bounces up about this high, and then explodes. We knew we were in trouble. 2 of us crawled on their stomachs, screwed those detonators out, and got to the road on the other side.
Excuse me, Jim.
Mhm.
How long did the fighting at Casino go on? Didn't that drag on for a long period of time?
I was there in November, and when we busted out of Anzio, the Polish troops took Casino. So that was 6-7 months. 7 months. Phil, you lost me. No, I'm still at Casino. We got relieved at Casino, went back for rest, and things weren't going good at Anzio, so we took the salt boats, our regiment first, and finally the whole 34th Division went on Anzio in the 1st of March. We stayed in Anzio until they broke out in May. Tell you a little about Anzio. Am I running out of time, Phil?
4 minutes?
Anzio was flat, had a Mussolini canal running through it, but the troops that had already been there ahead of us had that dug up to where you could crawl from one place to the other on your gun positions, and never show yourself at all to the enemy, because they were setting out their machine guns would rake the whole flat area there. We didn't have it too tough there. I think my platoon, and I was a platoon sergeant at that time, we only had a fatality of, before we pushed off, something like 7 or 8 killed and 15 wounded, something like that, which isn't too bad for sitting there for a month and a half, 2 months. But on 21st of May, we jumped off to head to Rome. Tough fighting all the way to Rome because we were cutting them off coming back from Casino. And I got within a few miles of Rome and figured that was enough, and I no longer was with them. Spent the next year in hospitals. In 1945, I was discharged. Did I get under my 30 minutes? Any questions? You see me bypass a lot of things, and I think Jerry will go with me. There's things that we won't tell you. Civilians took the worst brunt of it. Little kids, am I going overtime? Little kids really hurt you. No parents. I seen the picture here where girls was coming up and kissing you, riding down a Jeep. We had no Jeeps up there. They didn't want to come around the mutiny.
Yeah, you know, one person I really want to mention is Phil Wood, who has really arranged and got all these people going. And wherever you are, Phil, next week I know, because I helped do the video. I hope you can make it. You're in for a real treat. Gertrude Henschel was my secretary for 11 years at the college. I never had any idea the stories you're going to hear next week as she flees from east to west to hopefully be captured by the Americans. The whole point is, and it's very much the same, it's a very human story, just about real people like you and I, fought in a war that they didn't want and didn't plan. Anyway, thank you all for coming.